Hi there. We're continuing our journey through the Proverbs, the Mishlei Shlomo, the life sayings of Solomon. We're in chapter 26 and we're looking at verses 9 to 12. With the Proverbs, it's quite tricky sometimes accessing the meaning or what was in the original understanding of what was being written down. These, after all, are words that are written 3,000 years ago in a completely different context and culture. And so as we're trying to access them, we've got to try and understand what's behind the words that are being said. So in verse 9 here, it says, like thorns in the hand of a drunk, so is a proverb or a life saying in the mouth of a fool. Now the word that's used here for the life saying is the same word that is used for this book, this Mishlei Shlomo, I've called them life sayings. They're authoritative statements. They're more than just proverbs or old saws. They're actually directional words. So what it's saying here is that when a fool tries to be wise and starts giving people directions, it's a bit like a drunk waving around a thorn bush and catching somebody and hurting them. And so it's saying wisdom badly applied is actually harmful. And there's a similar thing to that in the next verse, in verse 10, where it says that like an archer who shoots at random to wound. It's a very difficult verse because the word for archer is rav, that means great one. It has several different meanings, but a lot of the translators come down and say the word archer because it's looking at this thing of how the fool isn't taking responsibility. But actually he's saying here that like an archer who shoots at random and ends up wounding people is somebody who hires a fool or a passerby. Someone who doesn't take care to be hiring and taking on as workers the right people. Someone who just sort of calls someone off the street, and particularly if they're calling someone who isn't qualified for it, then they're going to be in trouble. So again, there's harm can be done if someone doesn't apply the rules of wisdom. And then verse 11 is fairly straightforward. It says, as a dog goes back to his vomit, so a fool goes back and carries on, repeats his folly. No further explanation, really. We often read, there are several places in Scripture where it talks about dogs returning to their vomit. It was a picture used in ancient times because the dog was seen as really the lowest of the creatures. It wasn't like today where we care for dogs as pets. Dogs were pack animals that hung around rubbish tips. They were seen as the lowest of the low. And so a fool going back to his foolishness, repeats his foolishness, is like that dog returning to its own vomit. Not a very pleasant thought. But then the last verse 12, is actually saying something quite interesting because having run down the fool so much, the original Hebrew then says here, it means, do you see the man who is wise in his own estimation? There's more hope for the fool, for the Hasil, than there is for them. And that's an interesting one. So having said all this about the fool, saying someone who thinks themselves wise, presumably when they aren't, someone who sees themselves wise in their estimation, who can't be taught, who is incorrigible, there's actually more hope for the fool who could actually see their mistakes and change their ways than there is for that person. And so if we've been sitting and thinking, I'm not a fool, I'm not likely to do that, then this word is also, this last word in verse 12 is for us to take notice of, that we don't want to be wise in our own eyes. Somewhere else it says in the scriptures, don't be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord, be in awe of God. That's where the source to wisdom is. Have a good day.